All right, looks like we're all here. For any of you who don't know me, my name's Camille. I've been with Chenard's about the last 5 years now. I've been learning from Darren, so you probably already know him if you don't know me. I'm taking over his fruit tree spraying class this year. And everyone in person has got a little packet there, the fruit tree spraying schedule, which is also available on our website. You also have the 10% off coupon. So if you're going to be buying copper or sulfur or any of those products today, you'll get a 10%. I will do my best to keep up in the chat because I'm doing Zoom and in person. You are welcome to unmute yourself at the end, but until then, I do want to just say kind of in the chat, everyone in person, please speak up if you've got a question. And let's get started on fruit tree spraying, prevention and treatment of pests and diseases. When we're talking fruit trees here, we're talking mainly apples, pears, plums, quince, things like that. But it works for a variety of trees. So what and when? We're talking just about any large fruit tree. So dwarf fruit trees, semi-dwarf, anything like that. We're going to be covering your dormant sprays when all the leaves are off of your trees, sulfur, copper, spray oil, and timing those dormant sprays with weather conditions and all that. Your active season sprays, when your leaves are on the trees, you may have pests coming in and out that you'll want to treat when they're actually active. So what sprays to use and how to ID those pests. And then we'll go over a couple of spray examples, how to spray and what equipment you should spray with. So it's a pretty simple class. Just let me know if you've got any questions as we go through. So what am I spraying for and when? Most of your fruit trees are subject to a number of problems and they're a lot easier to prevent than to actually treat. So if you're on a good cycle, you're going to avoid a lot of the problems we're going to be talking about today. Fruit trees have bacterial problems, fungal problems, insect and mite problems, different times of year. Some of these problems are minor, cosmetic. Some of these, if you've got bugs on your trees, maybe they're actually beneficial insects. So it's really important to ID what kind of insect or mite you have on your trees. Got a question in chat. Can we all see the slides? I see it on my secondary computer. Can everyone else see them? They are cycling through. Okay, looks like I've got a positive on that. For anyone who is not seeing the slides, I am going to post this on YouTube later as well, so you'll be able to look it up. So why are we spraying? We are heavily breeding these trees specifically for production and for fruit quality. So a lot of the times when you're breeding for a really specific thing, you're leaving out a lot of disease resistances. The Honeycrisp apple is a perfect example. It's host to all sorts of different problems. So if you've got a Honeycrisp apple or something similar, you're really going to have to keep on top of your sprays to keep a healthy tree. Let's see, when. Most of the time when you're treating for these things, you're going to be treating in the dormant season. You're going to use less spray. You're going to use more effective spray than you are going to be in the active season. We have to be more careful about leaf burn and all these other things. Some diseases only spread during certain conditions, so you want to treat to match. Certain fungal issues can come up in a really wet spring once the leaves are already on. You can't treat with sulfur when it's above 70 degrees, so you're going to be using a different product. Many pests can only be controlled during their active times, so spray occurs during the active season. This is mostly with your insects. If you're looking at codling moth, for instance, or spotted wing Drosophila, you're going to have to spray when those things are actually on your trees, or you're basically just wasting your time. So we'll start with dormant season sprays. We actually got really lucky with the timing on this class. This whole week is going to be perfect for spraying. So if you're spraying your sulfurs, you're spraying your coppers, this week is a great time to do it, but there are some temperature parameters to look for. Your products that you're looking at are sulfur, lime sulfur, or copper. Sulfur is very effective. Lime sulfur is more effective, but also more caustic. So you'll want to be kind of careful. Make sure to read all of your labels. Some fruit trees are more sensitive than others. Everything we're dealing with here, your apples, your pears, things like that are going to be just fine. So bacterial and fungal diseases, copper will cover both. So I generally go with copper. It's kind of a good coverage. Your sulfur is going to be really great at fungal diseases, but it will not target your bacterial diseases. When you're treating cold season mite and insect pests, let's say you have Areophid mites on your pears, for instance. It's kind of a bumpy leaf that you see. It resembles several other diseases, but it can't be treated when you actually see it in the leaves. You have to treat it in the dormant season when the Areophid mites overwinter in the tree itself. So sulfur is very effective with that, lime sulfur, and also spray oils, which are suffocants. Most of your mites and insects lack the vital organs that humans do, so they breathe through their pores. If you clog those pores with an oil, it suffocates them and kills the pest out. So copper, sulfur, and spray oil also reduce lichen and moss. Most of your lichens and mosses on your trees are purely aesthetic, unless they're a really, really bad case and they're actually affecting your growing tips. So it's good to keep on top of it, make sure it doesn't get out of control. But if you see a little bit of lichen or moss, it's not really a huge problem. So starting with sulfur, probably the strongest product that we have, unless you're targeting bacterial diseases. This is a dusting wettable sulfur, so you can use it as a dust or you can use it in solution. The trouble with using it in solution is if you're using a really specific sprayer, it may clog the sprayer. So be kind of aware of this with powdered substances. Lime sulfur is more effective. It sticks better. It stays around a little bit longer, but it can be more caustic. So be really aware of your temperature parameters. You can't use it above 70 degrees. Definitely read the label. Make sure that it will work with your tree. Sulfur is one of the longest used pesticides and fungicides. Actually, I'm the beekeeper here too. So way back when, I think it's in the 1800s, I think they started using sulfur darts to cull the honeybee hives so that they could harvest the honey. So this has been in use for quite a while now. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Get one thing, this is the first class of beer. So sulfur can be used as your dust, like I mentioned, as a spray. It can be used as a fumigant too. If you're just getting into spraying, I recommend probably not even thinking about fumigating. It's more of an indoor thing anyhow. It's just a possibility if you want to look into it later. The spray does form a residue. It looks like powdery mildew, it isn't. So be aware when you're spraying it, you might see something that looks like it didn't work. Not necessarily true. You can usually rub it off with your fingers too.
Question. Oh, are these slides on the website?
These slides are going to be on the website. We're going to put them up on our YouTube channel, I think under tree and shrub maintenance and care. So some drift is okay. Sulfur will acidify your soil. It's not really going to hurt anything. It's actually commonly used to acidify soil for blueberries, rhododendrons, things like that. So it's not going to hurt if you get a little bit of drift on the stuff. Spraying copper, I'm most comfortable with copper. I spray copper on my trees every year, and it's definitely effective. I've had some anthracnose problems on my apple trees, and it's definitely clearing it up. So as a preventative and as a treatment, this is effective. Less effective than sulfur as a pure fungicide, but it's going to be an overall better blanket because it's going to cover your bacterial diseases as well. When you're looking at trees and you're looking at bacterial versus fungal cankers, it can be almost impossible to tell with the naked eye. So it's better to just use a blanket and just know you're covering all your bases. Again, with the 70-degree thing, I know I've said it a bunch, but you can spray during the active season as long as temperatures remain below 70 degrees. Above 70 degrees, you're going to start having damage on the tree. So you'd want to use a different product if you're still having problems. The leaves, again, are going to cover a lot more surface area. So if you're using this product when the leaves are on, you're going to be using a whole lot more of the product. A lot more cost effective and a lot more effective altogether if you do it during the dormant season. 2 to 3 sprays is what we're aiming for through the winter, which sounds easy at first until you realize how difficult it is to time it with the weather. On a mature tree with no disease history, 1 spray is totally fine, just as a simple preventative. If you have trees that have had disease in the past, you really want to try and get that 2 to 3 sprays per year. Did you have a question?
How much time prior to the next rain should these powders or tools?
Sorry, could you read?
How much time prior to the next rain should the sulfur or the copper be sprayed?
I'm actually gonna get into that right,
Okay.
I think on the next two slides.
Okay.
We're gonna get into temperature range and how long you have to wait before it rains again.
Okay.
Spray oil is another thing that you can use during the dormant season. This mostly targets your insects and your mites. This is the suffocant that I was talking about earlier. It will target your scale, your mealybug, most mites, some aphids as well. But you really have to get a thorough coating on it. You want to get every surface of the tree so that you actually get a touch on all of your pests. If it doesn't touch the pest, it doesn't suffocate, it doesn't kill. Timing dormant sprays. This is where we're going to get into rain and things like that. So you can start on most crops if disease pressure is high in early fall before the leaves have even dropped off. Like I said, it can be caustic. It can cause the leaves to burn or drop off. Conifers for needle blight is a perfect example of this. Blue spruce, for instance, could have a needle blight. Copper will knock the needle blight down, but your blue spruce isn't going to be blue next year because it's also going to knock off all the color. So the following year, it will retain its blue color, but it's going to affect the tree's growth for the year. You're going to want to spray when the weather will be very dry for 4 to 6 hours. This allows the product to actually dry on the tree. You don't want any major rainstorms for at least 48 hours. And that's the really hard part. We've got a perfect week ahead of us. It's a good time to spray right now. You want to, when I say 48 hours, heavy rain like we had on Monday. If we get a light rainstorm, I think it drizzled for about 15 minutes yesterday. That's not a problem at all. It's not going to wash anything away. You just don't want it to be completely diluted and washed off the tree within the 48 hours. You want the air temperature to be above freezing for at least 4 to 6 hours, that drying window. So spray as early in the morning as you can after it gets above freezing. Separate your different products at least 48 hours. You want to have them completely dry before you apply anything else. So you want to do a copper and you want to do a spray oil. You want to make sure that there's plenty of time between those sprays. Yes.
Can you mix copper and sulfur together and spray that together? Or they have to be dense?
Can we mix copper and sulfur together? I wouldn't recommend it. And most of the time the label will say don't spray with anything else. I don't actually have any solid information on that, but because all of my experience with any other chemicals, I'm going to say separate those and don't mix anything. You need to stop your dormant spraying at the first color of the flower buds. You can't spray anything on any tree when any flower is open, because that definitely poses a risk to all of your native pollinators and your honeybees. And I'm definitely a stickler on that. But as I said, I'm the beekeeper too. Active season sprays. So when your leaves are on and you're starting to see problems arise in the active season after you've sprayed your preventative coppers. Let's see. So spray during growing season to treat active spreading infections of many fungal and bacterial diseases. As I said before, if you're seeing fungal issues going into spring, if we've got really heavy rains or something, that's going to just really encourage all of these fungal issues. So you can use gentler things and more biological things, kind of like your Monterey disease control over there in the corner with the blue lid. You're also going to want to spray in season for fruit infesting insects, like your spotted wing Drosophila, your cherry fruit fly, that sort of thing. Active season fungal sprays, biological fungicides, like your Monterey disease control right here. These are much more gentle than copper. You may or may not actually stop the fungal disease, but you may, or you're not going to necessarily cure it, but you will stop it in its tracks and prevent it from continuing to infect the tree. Lighter concentrations of sulfur are an option, but again, they are caustic, so you have to be kind of careful and weigh, do I have a horrible disease problem here? Am I willing to sacrifice some of my productivity for the year? Neem is your primary insecticide, so if you're seeing your aphids or anything like that, it's pretty effective. Can also work as a very minor fungicide. If you've got a major fungal issue, neem isn't really going to help. If you have a minor fungal issue and you're trying to treat insects as well, neem is a good blanket coverage. Insect pests. ID is pretty critical for control. There are a lot of mites that are resistant to certain pesticides. So a spray oil may be more effective than something else, depending on what it is. Some insect populations are actually beneficial too. So if you're seeing some aphids or something on there and you're seeing a predator insect on there as well, it's important to know like, hey, the predator's got them under control, or hey, maybe this isn't a problem at all, or it's just aesthetic. You may not have to spray at all and you'd be saving a lot of time. And I do have some resources later in the slides that will help you to ID these different insects too. Much match an effective product with the insect life cycle. So for instance, your BT, your Bacillus thericide, is going to target all insect life forms. It's going to target your eggs, it's going to target your larvae, it's going to target your adults as well. Neem, pyrethrin, and spinosad, which is a biological as well, are your main organic options. BT should be in there as well. I'm sorry about that. So most common fruit tree pests that you're likely to see in your orchards, your apples and your pears and things, the codling moth can be a real problem. They do have 2 generations, so depending on how late your tree is, you may have to actually spray for these twice. The May spray is probably going to be pretty prevalent, particularly in apples, pears, like I said. In August, you may have to spray some of your pears and some of your really late apples. The winter banana, for instance, I know it's an apple, but it's a winter banana. It actually ripens sometime in November. So you're going to get that extra codling moth generation in that apple, and it's really important to spray twice for that, or you could lose the whole crop. The codling moth is kind of tricky to nail down as far as when it's actually active. So you can check out OSU Extension's website, and they actually track these. They have pheromone traps all over the place, and they'll kind of let you know when the codling moths are becoming active in the area. And then that will help you time your sprays. You can get pheromone traps for your orchards as well. I think we sometimes sell them here. I don't know if they're in stock currently. The caterpillars act a little bit differently than the apple maggot too. So based on what you see in the apple, you may be able to identify the codling moth versus the apple maggot. The caterpillars are going to enter through the base of the apple, and they're going to be really OCD. They go straight through the side when they exit. So that's the codling moth. The apple maggot is quite a bit messier. They are in between codling moths. So it looks like you've got one long space of just this awful moth, but you've actually got 2 different moths infecting your apples. The cherry fruit fly doesn't only affect cherries, but it's awful on cherries. You want to spray that around Memorial Day. They look like little fungus gnats. They have tiger stripe wings, and you can get them with pheromone traps too. The cool thing about the cherry fruit fly is if you have your trees spaced adequately, they are pretty poor migrators. So they're unlikely to go from one orchard to the next, but they can go from one tree to the next if they're close together. Your spotted winged Drosophila has become more and more of a problem as of late. They have 7 or more generations, and they go over any kind of soft fruit. They're targeting fruit as it's ripening. So neem is a really good, effective way of taking care of these because it's really safe too. You can apply neem. I like to do 7 days before harvest, but you can really do day before harvest as long as you really wash the fruit off. It's not going to hurt you, but it does leave kind of the bitter residue. The spotted winged Drosophila is actually pretty easy to track too. They're attracted to anything sweet. They look just like any other fruit fly, but the males have 2 spots on their wings, so you can ID them from the 2 spots. You can hang something in your tree just with a little bit of sweet smelling stuff in there. You can use apple cider, you can use vinegar, you can use wine, a little drop of soap to kind of keep them in there once they get there. And then you can start seeing, oh, I've got spotted winged Drosophila. And they'll find it fast. So let's go through a couple of spray examples here. We're going to start with codling moth, which is probably the worst perpetrator in here. Primary pest in apples and pears. They're an occasional problem in plums, peaches, and walnuts. So watch out for them, but they may not be there. Again, 2 generations, May and August. You're going to want to spray both of those, especially for your late harvest crops. There are no dormant sprays to treat these guys, so you have to spray when they are active. Spinosad, BT, neem, you're going to want to hit them 2 to 3 times, 10 to 14 days apart. This usually starts 20 days after peak of bloom, but again, look at OSU extension, find a pheromone trap. Just make sure you're spot on with that and make sure you're not spraying during bloom, you're spraying after bloom. Peach leaf curl is another really bad one, and this can affect a couple of different things. It says peach leaf curl, but it will also affect nectarines and apricots. Common symptom is your really discolored, warty leaf. This does look like a couple of other problems too. So make sure you turn the leaf over. Pear rust looks a lot like this on the top, but you flip it over and you've got this alien mass with these little spore pods sticking out. So there are a few things that look like this. This also kind of resembles an Areophid mite problem. Just make sure you get the ID correct on this. You want to treat peach leaf curl with your dormant season spray. Once it really appears, there's not too much you can do about it. You can slow it down with your Monterey disease control active season, but you really want to get a good 2 to 3 sprays of copper when you start seeing this problem.
Sulfur also work on it or just?
Sulfur should work on this too, because it's a fungal issue. And it can be spread by conifers too. So if you're in a densely wooded area, you've got peaches around, it can spread from the conifers, which is not fun in Oregon.
Yeah.
There are certain varieties of peaches that are resistant to peach leaf curl. So if you're starting an orchard, make sure you get your disease resistance list. I think the, oh, what am I thinking? The Oregon frost, the frost peach is resistant to peach leaf curl. Also a really delicious stone-free fruit. So look for your disease resistance. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Disease resistant varieties when you're planting, and that's going to be really helpful in the future. How to spray. I'm just going to say this 2 or 3 more times. Make sure you read the label. Every product is a little bit different. You are definitely looking for your active ingredients rather than the brand. There's a lot of different products out there for your sulfurs, your coppers, your BTs, things like that, but always read the label on every single one of them. Usually when you look at the label, you're going to see really specific instructions for your trees. There's instructions for orchards, there's instructions for houseplants, there's instructions for all these different types of plants, and they'll tell you a couple of really important things. Apply your dormant season sprays as weather allows. Make sure you're not spraying it when it's freezing. Make sure you're not spraying it when it's raining. You want to get a really good coating so you're not wasting all of your product. Apply your active season sprays in the early morning and late evening. This avoids conflict with pollinators. It's going to dry before they're really out. It's going to hang onto the tree and dry after they've gone to bed. Anticipate how much spray you're going to need. This is really important because you don't want to waste a really expensive product here. Your typical adult tree, I'm talking probably 15, 20 feet tall, is going to take somewhere around 2 to 3 gallons of spray, depending on whether it's dormant or not. I'm talking dormant here. You want to evenly coat all surfaces. So you want to get the trunk, you want to get the branches, you want to get all the buds, you want to have a nice little drip going on. You see in the picture here, there's a little bit of copper hanging off. You just see a little blue drop. So you want to get an even coating that isn't necessarily dripping really hard, but you are seeing the droplets on the branches. You want to dispose of any unused mixed spray. It is definitely acceptable to dilute the spray that you have not used and just sprinkle it in the area where you sprayed. Don't spray it on the tree because then you're diluting it and you're basically effectively raining on your tree. But you can spray it around the base of the tree. You can spray it in your lawn. You can spray it on any other ornamentals that may or may not need it. Blueberries definitely benefit from copper sulfur sprays. Lilacs, basically anything ornamental in the area, you can spray your diluted product on, and it may help a little bit. And you want to rinse this probably 2 or 3 times until there's no color left. Equipment, the sprayer is really important. You may not have access to a hose. You may have a really large tree and access to a hose. It's important to know what you have access to and how your hands are going to function. If you're doing a 20-foot tree, a hand pump sprayer is probably not going to be something that you're going to be wanting to do. This little green sprayer right here is interesting. If you're doing small projects with it, there's actually a button on here that locks the spray in. So you just have to hold it and it sprays freely. So it definitely saves your wrist a bit. Backpack sprayers are pretty common if you don't have access to a hose. If you do have access to a hose, I've got a little red sprayer right behind everybody there. Good hose attachment. I don't think I actually have a picture of it here. But you can change between 3 different sprays. The cool thing about the red sprayer that attaches to the hose is you can pour as much mixture into the basin as you want. It mixes above. So when you're done, you pour that back into the bottle and there's no waste at all. Oh. That's definitely my favorite sprayer right there. Your ready to use product is usually a little bit more expensive, but there are hose attachments for that too. There's no mess, there's no rinsing. You just unhook it from the hose and stick it back on the shelf. So those are really handy, but they are usually a little bit more expensive. If you are going to use your backpack sprayer or your hand pumps or something like that, definitely have a measuring device handy. You don't want to overdo it because then you're wasting product. You don't want to underdo it because you're wasting product again, obviously. Protective gear, depending on what you're using, we're using all natural products around here, but you always want to make sure you're protected from any droplets. You want to wear, I just wear a bandana, but you can wear an N95 mask too. Definitely wear some eye protection, gloves, long sleeves, pants. I usually wear a hat too when I'm spraying. And I do have several other resources here. You can check us out on YouTube. This is actually the same place this class is going to be uploaded to later. Pacific Northwest Handbooks on Pests and Diseases is a really amazing website. They used to only be in paper form, but now they've got their entire catalog online. You type in your tree, you type in your pest, and you'll get a whole list of what could be ailing your tree. So you type in apple, for instance, malice. And you go, well, what could I have? You open the disease panel and you go, anthracnose. You've got all of your insects, all of your fungal diseases. And you usually have a picture, a description, and a timing of when these things can affect the tree. So this is a really awesome resource that you can look into right here. And I think that's just about all I have for you today, but I would like to open up the floor to any questions at this point.
I guess this is for apples. You talked about the cotton moth. First, when you refer to the base of the apple, is that the end that's attached to the tree or the other end? When you say the base of the apple or the base of the fruit?
So when I'm saying the base of the fruit for when codling moth is burrowing in, they usually go in from the flower up to the center. They kind of core out where the core is, and then they go straight out the side of the apple.
So the moths or the insects that have the diseases of the maggots that burrow into the fruit, the eggs are being laid on the apple, and then when they hatch, they're going into the apple.
Yes.
So is there a way, can you look at the base of the apple and see if there's eggs there or not? Or
it's difficult to look at the base of the apple because it's a little bit messy around there, but you can usually see the exit hole. When you see the exit hole, you know that there's been a codling moth in there, you know that you have a problem.
So when you spray for the moth, are you basically killing the eggs or the moth?
You're trying to kill all stages.
And once it's in the apple, then it's...
Once it's in the apple, it's basically in the apple.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good metric to have a feeling for it if a particular tree is too far gone with, say, fungus.
So that's a really good question. How do you know when a tree is too far gone? How do you know when it's time to cull the tree rather than the treat? It really depends on a case by case, and it depends on where your fungal infection is. If you have a really bad fungal infection, you've got lesions in the base of the trunk, that's pretty much a cull. If you have a fungal issue, you have lesions towards the end. Usually you can prune off to healthy material. You can continue to spray and you can stop it in its tracks. But if it's gotten to the point where your trunk is just covered in black, there's not really too much you can do.
Now, will that be a bad source? Like, for example, we have one like that, but it's still super productive.
Okay.
But is that a source? Like, we should get rid of it, or is like, as long as it produces?
If it continues to produce, you can keep it around for a while, but I would be a little bit worried depending on what fungal issue it has that it may infect other trees.
Yeah, that's.
We are seeing some infection of another one, but the tree itself is actually trying to heal over the lesions.
Okay,
So it's.
That's a good
fighting
sign
back
then.
hard. We've never sprayed,
okay,
but a king apple near this Liberty apple, I pruned out some diseased wood last year.
okay,
And I'm noticing an adjacent, and the king apple is quite a bit younger. The gold rush in question is probably 10 years old now, maybe 12.
okay,
And an adjacent Liberty tree is picking up a few lesions as well, but the gold rush is definitely the most affected, but the
Okay.
fruit crop this year was insane.
nice.
So,
So
it's
what you
funny.
can do is you can kind of help the tree. Your back, it sounds like it's a bacterial or a fungal canker at this point. If you cut into it and cut out all of the infected material and then put some pruning sealer on there when it hasn't rained for a little while and it hasn't been frozen for a while.
So underneath the
can-
healing wood, so the lip, right underneath the lip, where the lip is healing, so you're basically gouging between where the two lips are trying to close.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And that does work in some cases, but I need to see the tree.
Yeah, I can take some pictures and
Okay.
bring it back in. Darren helped me with it last year, but it was just, I didn't have great pictures. So
Gotcha.
the light was bad, but anyway.
The trees are just so productive, it's like,
Hate to take that thing out.
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
So we inherited it, orchard, small, but it's covered in green moss. I mean, like you can pull off,
Okay.
so copper, it sounds like.
Copper will
Is
help to
it-
curb your green moss if you can just peel it off.
Mhm.
How many trees you have?
What is there?
6 or 8.
6 or 8 trees? Okay, that's not too bad. If you can physically remove some of that, that's gonna really put a damper on its growth. It's probably not going to actually damage the tree. It's more of an aesthetic thing. It can cause other fungal issues if it completely encompasses the tree, but your copper will help, your physical removal will help too.
Okay, and we heard also like spraying, like water, like almost, high
Pressure washer.
pressure
Mhm.
water.
That can help too, as long as you're not damaging the bark underneath,
Okay,
which it should be fine on a healthy tree.
but wouldn't it be better to try to remove it so that the sprays stick better on the tree
Yes.
itself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
One more, so I've ordered from you guys a bare root apple. So when that comes in, I don't know if it's end of January.
Yep, we're coming up pretty cool, pretty quick on it.
Will that have already been treated for dormant sprays, or will I probably need to treat that?
That's a good question. I don't actually know if the bare root stock has already been treated. I don't think it has, but don't quote me on that. Do we have any questions in Zoom chat? Oh, looks like Kathy a minute ago said, is this good to do for blueberries? And the answer is definitely yes. There are several issues that blueberries have that can also be treated with copper fungicide. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.